Welcome to the Chalkboard, my fellow football nerds, for episode number 28 of Chalk Talk, brought to you by the Painted Lines. I'm your host, Shane Half. You can follow me on Twitter at @halfandhalf_TPL. I'm joined today by the best co-host in the game. You've seen him on the Tough Cover Pod. It's Mark Henry Jr. Give him a follow on Twitter at @MarkHenryJr_. Mark, how you doing tonight?
I'm doing great. Personally, I've had some good news come across that I'm sure we'll get to at some point in the pod, and somewhere you can check me out on Friday. But in terms of football, in terms of sports, it has not been a good, 5, 6, whatever you want to say, days since Thanksgiving for me. Ever since that Thanksgiving night, I had a big bet on the Egg Bowl in college football. Ever since then, you get to Saturday, I had a terrible gambling day. You get to Sunday, the Eagles let me down against my most despised team in sports. My second most despised team in sports won their biggest college football game in a decade over Ohio State. And then you get to Monday, and today's Tuesday. I'm all out of sorts, if you can't tell. But you get to Monday, and Brian Kelly leaves Notre Dame, who is my favorite college football team for anyone out there who doesn't know. So it has been a hectic couple of days, and it has been a rough couple of days from a sports perspective for me.
Yeah, same for me. So Oklahoma, who's my football team, loses Bedlam on Saturday. Just into the game, a heartbreaking loss, knocks them out of a Big 12 title game, a potential playoff spot. And then shortly thereafter, news breaks that the head coach, the defensive coordinator, the strength coach, the wide receiver coach are all leaving, and the transfer floodgates have opened. And then you got to the mess that was the Eagles game on Sunday. And so all in all, crappy sports weekend. And we're going to break it all down. So if you are watching live, be sure you drop us a comment here. Maybe just say something nice. We might need the boost here to our self-esteem as we go throughout this podcast. It's been a rough weekend in the sports world, but we're going to break it all down for you. And so I don't want to. But let's dive into the mess of the Eagles game against the Giants. The Eagles lose 7-13. I know you don't want to talk about any aspect of this game, but where are we going to start tonight?
It's got to be the Jalen's. You got to probably start with the Jalen's. Which one you want to start with, that's up for debate. But, I mean, I will say, because I think Jalen Hurts is something we'll talk about ad nauseum in this podcast, and just like we have in the past, and we will going forward, because him and Sirianni, like I said, every single week, are the most important aspects of this season and of this team right now, because they're the most important things going forward. So that's the most important thing. But I do think that it's being lost in the fact that Jalen Hurts had a bad game, that if Jalen Reagor catches that ball, or one of the two balls, I should say, and scores a touchdown, that I think that there's a lot less conversation about how bad of a game it was for Jalen Hurts, not only because the stat line would look a little better, but just because it would show that he was able to lead a game-winning drive to win the game at the end of the game and win a game that they didn't play well in. And that would have been really important for the playoff positioning. I know the percentage is somewhere like 23% right now, and it would have been somewhere like 50 or something like that percent if we won that game. So it's a big loss no matter how you slice it. But I do think that, Jimmy Kempski tweeted it out right before we got the ball, and eventually with the two drops on that drive, he tweeted out, Jalen Hurts has a minute and some change here to kind of make everyone forget about the fact that the rest of the 58 minutes and whatever seconds was not a very good football game from Jalen Hurts. And he was about to do it. I think he did a good job on that last drive. I thought that the last two drives were looking good until the drops, and then on the first drive before that one, the fumble by Boston Scott. It's just, and we'll get into it more in depth, but it is just, there's so many little things that had to happen for the Eagles to lose this game. Like, they played their worst game of the year, and they still had a chance to win the game, and they still had, they should have won the game, realistically. If you look at the drops, you look at the Greg Ward drop, you look at the touchdown that was negated by Boston Scott, you look at, the horrible decision-making by Jalen Hurts when, if you just got sacked or threw it away or did anything besides throw a pick, we would have gotten field goals. And then maybe at the end of the game, instead of taking a shot at the end zone, you get a chance to take a field goal to tie the game. There are so many what ifs that it's hard to even evaluate this game for me, because it's just, I'm just playing a game of what ifs.
Yeah, I mean, just terrible performance by the offense, start to finish. I thought the defense played pretty well. Let's just start with Hurts though. So he throws 3 interceptions. Now the first interception, that throw to Quez Watkins, it drives me crazy on broadcasts when they talk about things that happened on an angle we didn't see, and then they don't even show a replay. And so they're talking about, is there going to be a flag, some pushing at the top of that route? They never show a replay, and then they just cut to a commercial. Well, I've seen the all 22, and I'm here to tell you, if you haven't seen it, that there absolutely should have been pass interference. Quez Watkins is manhandled as he's coming out of that. And so it's hard for me to fault Jalen Hurts for that. If anything, honestly, I fault Quez because he just stops his route. It's like, oh, they grabbed me. I can't keep trying to run a route here. But that first interception, I'm going to say it should have been pass interference. Quez shouldn't have stopped his route. I see what Hurts is reading there, and I think it was the right read. Bad result. It happens. The second, now I'm getting these, was the interception on the deep ball to Rager the next one? I keep getting them mixed up. No, it was the third.
That was the third one.
Okay.
The second one is the one I have a problem with.
Okay, so the throw that's targeting Boston Scott. That play also should have been pass interference. You can go back and roll it. The guy shoves him down, gets the interception. That said, never in a million years should Jalen Hurts ever even try that throw. You're targeting a 5'6" guy that's standing stationary on the goal line, surrounded by defenders. What do you think is going to happen? Like, throw that ball away, live to play another down. We talked about it with Carson Wentz for years, hero ball, not letting a play die. You're on the 1 yard line, let the play die and live for another down. So that one was on him. Now, there probably should have been a pass interference, but that is on him. The third one to Rager was open. I mean, Rager had a step if there's not a safety over the top. I don't know if he just missed that safety or what, but there's a safety clearly over the top. But even if he misses that safety, or even if the safety is not there, he underthrows that ball so bad. Like it never had a chance. So not only was it a bad read, but even if the read had been right, he underthrew that ball by so much, it never had a chance. Just bad break. Then that last play, I mean, you see the last play, Smith is open upfield. He wasn't open on that initial crosser. He's open as the play kind of breaks down and Jalen scrambles. Mm-hmm. I've seen people saying, there's a safety there. That's a tight window to make a throw. That's not a tight window to make a throw. That safety had no chance to get over there. An NFL quarterback can make that throw. I just don't think Jalen saw it. But at the end of the day, he put the ball in Jalen Rager's hands at the goal line. Now, the most Eagles thing ever might be dropping the pass. The second most Eagles thing ever would have been catching it and being down at like the 6-inch line and time running out while we tried to line up to spike the ball. So you can take your pick of which one would have been worse, I guess. But just a brutal performance by the offense all around.
The first one was the one that actually made me more upset. The one that hit him right on the helmet. That has to be caught because he would have been right in the end zone. But I still think he falls in the end zone, and that's a touchdown on the second one, personally.
I think so, too.
I'm not a physics major, but I think it looked like he would have fell into the end zone probably. But yeah, I mean, it's just like, I think, I don't know if I said this on this podcast. I talk way too much football now. But I will say that I was giving Howie some credit last week. He was 5-6 with a young quarterback that was looking pretty good. We had 3 first-round draft picks that were all in the top however many picks at that point. And, things were feeling pretty good. And all it takes is 2 Jalen Rager drops at the end of the game to bring me back to, reality on how badly Howie Roseman really has screwed up certain decisions, specifically related to the receiver position.
Speaking of the receiver position, here's a fun fact for you. You know what Eagles receiver led the team in EPA per target? J-Jaw. JJ Arcega-Whiteside led the Eagles receivers in EPA with a plus 1.2. How pathetic is that?
I liked that J-Jaw play. That was a good play. They got like what, 15 yards on it or whatever. It was a nice play.
Yeah, so J-Jaw officially the best receiver in the game for the Eagles. Now, obviously, that doesn't take into account the times that Devonta Smith was open and didn't get the ball. But You're just not going to win games on offense like this. You got a Boston Scott fumble. You've got 3 picks, multiple blocks. You've got holds to wipe out a touchdown. Greg Ward dropping a touchdown. I mean, you're not going to win a game playing like that. And yet I've actually seen people online complaining that the Eagles didn't run the ball enough. Like, what game were people watching? In the first half, the Eagles ran the ball 19 times and they passed it 18 times. In the second half, it was 18 runs to 8 passes before the final drive, where obviously you throw the ball every time because there's a minute left. So going into that last drive, it's 33 runs to 23 passes. If people really think that that's passing the ball too much on the 25th rated pass defense in the NFL, missing 2 starting players in their secondary, I think that tells you what you really need to know about Jalen Hurts.
I would only argue because Brian Baldinger, I thought said something funny and smart. He thinks if the Eagles played Service Academy football and ran the triple option against New York, they would have won the game. And he said that he truly believes it. And I kind of do too. If they committed to the triple option, I think they would have won that game just because they wouldn't have turned the ball over when they did in the red zone.
But by the same token, there's really people online blaming Sirianni for losing this game with his play calling. And if you're saying that throwing the ball 40% of the time against a bottom NFL pass defense, missing 2 starters is too much, that tells you all you need to know about your actual feelings about the quarterback. I mean, put it aside. Like, what other team are you going to look at that's that bad in pass defense, missing starters, and say, yeah, throwing the ball 40% of the time, that's too much? Like, and you can look at the final stats and you can say it was 33 runs to 31 passes. It's 8 consecutive passes in a 2-minute drill situation. Like, this was not a game plan issue. This was an execution issue, and the large majority of it fell on Jalen Hurts. Jalen Hurts, in his last 6 starts, has thrown 3 touchdown passes. 3 in 6 weeks. He's had over 200 yards passing 1 time since week 4. In this game, he was 3 of 11 with 2 interceptions on throws over 10 yards. He had a completion percentage above expectation of negative 8.5%, and his EPA on passing plays was negative 16.4. He cost the Eagles 16.4 points by throwing the football in this game. It's just a terrible performance. Now, what does that mean going forward? Well, you can have a bad game. Everybody has a bad game. This was the worst game of his career. Is he this bad of a player? No. But again, it just raises the questions that we've been raising all along about, is this the type of offense that you can win games with? Can you build an offense this way with him at the helm? And I still have serious questions. I'm not judging it based off of this game. If you've listened to me consistently, I've had this concern going back to when they drafted him last year. Obviously didn't know he was going to become a starter at that point. But serious concerns. He's got a few games left to turn this around, but man, just not a good look against a very poor football team.
Yeah, just to play devil's advocate, I will say that there was a couple times where I was like, oh, why are we throwing the ball? Which is stupid, and that probably, you're right, it probably does tell you something about what you think about Jalen Hurts, and I think that's a great point. I do think I think it was 3rd and 5 when he threw that pick, where it was interference, by the way. That was a good point by you, when Boston Scott got shoved down around the pylon, and then they make that pick. But I still think that's the take everything, all the horrible analytics you could say, EPA, passer rating, everything points to how bad this game was. And I even can excuse the other 2 picks a little bit that sandwiched this one. That decision on 3rd down by Sirianni to throw the ball and then by Jalen Hurts not to throw it away, that is an indefensible decision by Sirianni, in my opinion, and way more indefensible decision by Jalen Hurts to not either run it or throw it away. And you're probably right that me saying on the 30-yard line or whatever that was, that I wanted Nick Sirianni to run the ball, that probably says a lot on 3rd and 5, but I was ready to accept a field goal at that point. And then Jalen Hurts throws that pick. And I do think that if we get a field goal, then they would have at least went to overtime.
And there was a little bit of game management issues, I thought, going on with that drive right before half. So the Eagles, they get the ball, they've got the 2nd and goal at the 2 with 1 timeout, 12 seconds left. And so they try the QB power run and it doesn't get in. So they call their timeout. Well, the problem is you mentioned running the ball. The problem is there's only 8 seconds left and you don't have a timeout. So if you run the ball, you're committed. We're scoring or we're taking it to half without points. The defense knows that. They don't even have to respect the run there. It's a small thing, but if you're going to do a run play and a pass play, I'd rather see you pass it on second down. So you have the option to run the ball on third down because you still got that timeout in your pocket. So, I don't fault Sirianni for not running there. Because again, if you don't get in, it's the end of the half, but just very poor decision-making by Hurts.
I believe the first pick was on third down as well. I could be wrong on that. But that was almost in field goal range. If not, there was also another play that hasn't been talked about a lot. I can't quite remember where this was on the field. We might've been on our own 40. But Jalen Hurts, I think it was 3rd and 5. And in my head, I was kind of like, okay, if we keep this within 4th and 5, or if we get like 2-3 yards here, we'll probably go for it on 4th down. And Jalen Hurts takes the sack. And that felt like just like a back-breaking thing there. It leaves you optionless and you have to punt when we already were losing. That was, that's not a pick. That's not a turnover, but it basically is. I mean, it's a 60-yard pick. It's just a punt. That was just as damning to me as the turnovers. And Jalen's done a great job avoiding sacks. Jalen's done a great job avoiding turnovers until this game. This was a very uncharacteristic game, not to steal a line from Jalen Reagor. But this was an uncharacteristic game for Jalen Hurts, even if there were echoes of the same concerns that we've been talking about all year in terms of not protecting the ball, in terms of taking dumb sacks, in terms of making kind of dumb plays, and in terms of, honestly, I'm not going to go too far deep into this and, try to play sports psychiatrist. I didn't love Jalen Hurts' body language throughout the game. I didn't really love how he was reacting to maybe his receivers' miscommunication or not running the routes he was expecting. That's something I haven't really seen from Hurts before. And like we said, it was his worst game. So, maybe that gets to you a little bit. But it was just an all-around horrible performance from Hurts. And I'm not going to sit here and defend it, even if I think that it doesn't disqualify him from being the starting quarterback on day one next year. But it's a hard performance to defend.
Yeah, and I mean, to Baldinger's point about they could have run the triple option and beat the Giants, maybe. What is that? What do you learn from that, though? Like we've said all along, to get into the playoffs is playing for a chance to get embarrassed in the wild card round. This team cannot compete with the Buccaneers. They can't compete with, these other Yeah, we'll get there. They can't compete with
Tampa. Not Tampa. Give me Arizona.
Okay. They can't compete with these NFC teams. So what are we're playing? I mean, and I'm not saying I don't want us to make the playoffs. I do. Playoff experience is valuable, but what's more valuable than getting embarrassed in a wild card weekend game is finding out if your quarterback can play. And so, yeah, could we run the ball 50 times and throw it 5 and beat the Giants? Maybe. What do you learn from that? Well, the only thing I learned from that is that you don't trust your quarterback to throw against that defense at all. So I'm not saying we should be playing air raid the rest of the season, but I mean, if you know her, if you're done with Hurts, you say he's not the guy, we're going to move on. Okay, do everything you can to minimize him and win games now, but they need to see what he's got. Now, I will say one positive from the offense. I don't know who's designing this run game. I don't know if it's Sirianni. I don't know if it's Stoutland. I know he was the run game coordinator for a while. Some of the concepts these offensive line guys are running is just phenomenal. Like there's some clips up on Twitter and stuff, but there's several times like they were running this counter play with Jalen Hurts and they would pull Jordan Mailata and Jordan Mailata and Landon Dickerson across the formation. And those guys, they were pulling at the snap in unison, sealing off like the tackle and in Lane Johnson blocking down on line, but just beautiful stuff that there's honestly probably not another line in football that could pull those off. And so some really creative things in the run game that a lot of people probably miss just seeing like running the ball, but it was impressive stuff from the running game.
I thought that you put that really well when you mentioned, of course, you want to make the playoffs and playoff experience is really important, but you do have to find out what Jalen Hurts is, and that is more important going forward than making the wild card game. So if it does come down to that, I totally agree there. And yeah, the running concepts, maybe it comes down to concepts, and you're right. I think that you'd probably be able to pick that kind of stuff up more than I would watching tape. But I think what it really comes down to is Lane Johnson, Landon Dickerson, Jason Kelsey, and Jordan Mailata are some bad dudes,
Mhm.
and they are good at their jobs, and they are just mauling dudes at the point of the line of scrimmage, and it's fun to watch. You don't get to say that an offensive line is fun to watch very often, but you get a 10-12 yard run, and these Lane Johnson's doing like a full first down dance in like the second quarter. It's fun to watch this offensive line go to work, and they're a rowdy bunch. I mean, Mailata got in a fight last week, and it's just old school football. Not that I'm someone that's like pining for offensive line play and old school football, but it's fun to watch, especially with these guys that are Eagle legends in Lane Johnson and Jason Kelsey, and then now obviously a young guy in Jordan Mailata, and another young guy in Landon Dickerson who seems to be coming along quite nicely as well.
Yeah, I'm just if you can't enjoy the beauty that is watching the Eagles offensive line, you're never going to see an offensive line that you think is interesting to watch, because the things that they do, the way that they work together. I mean, having a center that can plant a defensive end and then get out and block a safety, you don't see that very often.
And by the way, you could see how important Jason Kelsey was when he was missing some of that time in the second quarter, in the first half, I should say. So you can see how important each one of these guys are. And imagine if this offensive line still had Brandon Brooks out there, like a healthy Brandon Brooks. I mean, not that we should be counting on that going forward at any point, or should have been counting on that. But I mean, yeah, it's insane how good this offensive line is, and it's nice to go into next year, at least feeling. Actually, I shouldn't say that because Jason Kelsey might retire, but who knows? This offensive line, at least even just if you take Lane, you take Dickerson, you take Mailata, Dillard, you probably trade him, I imagine, and you're feeling pretty good about 3/5 of your offensive line and the two tackles, which are the most important spots.
Yeah. But the bad news coming out of the game is that Jalen Hurts has a banged up ankle. They said that their game planning is if he's going to be able to play on Sunday, but they're not sure about that. Now, can the Eagles handle the Jets with Gardner Minshew at the helm? Yeah, probably. You better hope so. But honestly, like, the worst possible outcome I can think of here is Hurts is unable to play. He's got to sit in this. And then, I mean, Gardner Minshew is going to go light up the Jets because the Jets are atrocious. And then you go into your bye week with Jalen Hurts' last game being a 3-interception loss to the Giants and Gardner Minshew dropping 40 points on the Jets. And then you get a bye week for the Philly news cycle to run. And that'd just be the worst possible outcome imaginable. So hopefully Jalen Hurts is able to play when they play the Jets on Sunday.
Yeah, I didn't think about that, but Jalen Hurts is going to play. Breaking news here from me. You can credit me. Yeah, per sources, source being trust me, bro. But yeah, I think Jalen Hurts is going to play. He's a gamer. He kind of downplayed it, I believe, when he was asked. So I can't imagine. I feel like you'd have to take an axe to that guy's ankle to take him out right now. So, whatever criticisms we want to have, and I'm not saying that, maybe if he's really hurt, he won't play. But he played through it. I think he'll continue to.
Yeah. So I tweeted this out during the game. So the Eagles offense on the sideline with the whole Bernie Sanders meme of I'm once again asking for the defense to bail us out. What did you think of the defense in this game? Were you impressed by the defense? I mean, it's the Giants. You did hold them to 13. What were your thoughts about the defense in this game?
It's hard to know whether I should feel impressed by the defense or if I should be like, oh my God, the Giants offense is even worse than I thought it was. Like, wow, it is pathetic that they were only able to score 13 points with all of the turnovers we had and with all of the situations that they got the ball in good field position on 3 and outs. And the fact that team only scored 13 points is just like a travesty to modern football.
Yeah, didn't they hoisted Joe Judge and carried him off the field too? That was just great. I will say this. I thought the defense played well, but in the last 7 games, the defensive line has 8 sacks, and 6 of them were against the Lions. They have the 5th most cap allocated to the defensive line in the league. They were playing a very, very bad offensive line. And I mean, Fletcher Cox flashed in the run game, but they barely touched Daniel Jones. Like, this defensive line's not elite. They haven't been elite that they don't exist on most plays. And so it's ironic, at the beginning of the year the coverage was so soft and we were like, well, that's why the defense isn't getting pressure. Well, the coverage has changed and the defensive front is still not getting pressure. For me, that is a major concern for this team moving forward.
Yeah, I mean, we said it before the year that, or at least, we thought that the offensive line and the defensive line was going to be an absolute strength coming into the year, and we thought that maybe this team could compete to win the division or compete to make a playoffs just off the strength of our trenches and off the strength of our offensive line and our defensive line, both being top 5 in the NFL. And we just went ad nauseum talking at length about how good that offensive line is and how much that they've lived up to that moniker of being a top 5 offensive line and one of the best in football. The defensive line is the exact opposite. I mean, the defensive line is one of the most disappointing units in football.
Is the Eagles' offensive line the best offensive line in the NFL?
I'd have to look at the numbers behind it. I'm sure you'd probably have a better idea of where PFF is with that. There's certainly the offensive line that guys like Brian Baldinger, I forget the guy's one name. I think it's Mosher. I think there's some other guys out there that like Schwartz. There's a lot of other people that like to talk about offensive line, and they put out clips about offensive linemen and highlights about stuff like that. And I feel like maybe it's just me being an Eagles fan, so that's why I see more of them. But I feel like I see more Eagles offensive line clips out there than anyone else. So if they're not the best, they're certainly the flashiest, and they're certainly the most exciting, I guess.
Yeah. On the flip side, is the Eagles? Do you think the Eagles' defensive line is a top 10 unit in the league?
Defensive line? Absolutely not.
Yeah, I don't think so either. I would say they're probably in like that. Maybe average. I don't even know if they're an above average unit.
I think,
to be honest,
I think you look at the names and they're above average to average. I think they've been below average though. I'd have to look at the sacks and pressure numbers in relation to the rest of the NFL, but I watch other games and it feels like there's teams that get much more pressure. You watch Washington last night without Chase Young, and they're getting at Russell Wilson with ease more than we got at Daniel Jones. So that's something that you have to be concerned about. A team without their top defensive player and their like best pass rusher is doing a better job rushing the passer still without that guy than we are.
Yeah. All right. I got that all off my chest. You got anything else you want to say about this game, or are you ready to move on?
No, let's bury the tape of that game. You know, they bury the tape. I think Matt Campbell did it after we beat them. So I think Nick Sirianni's got to be a football guy, and he can bury it and grow a flower on top of it.
There you go. On the contrary, I hope they roll it in the locker room every day this week. But moving on, let's throw it around the NFL here. We got the Chicago Bears traveling to – oh, go ahead.
Bury it on Saturday or Friday.
There you go. That'll work. And plant a flower on top. I like it. Actually, the baller move is to like put some seeds on top of it and then sneak back there at night and put a flower in there instead and be like, look, it's a sign. I don't know. That seems like something cheesy that Sirianni would be into.
I like it.
All right, Chicago travels to Detroit. They win 16-14. We may have had a bad football weekend, but Matt Nagy had the time of his life as Andy Dalton threw for 300 yards on the Lions. Andy Dalton, starter for life in the Matt Nagy offense. Am I right?
Yeah. It's pretty funny. I heard last night at a college basketball game, Notre Dame versus Illinois. Actually.
Oh, you froze. We'll see if you come back here
it was
for
right
a second.
After the you lost me there for a second. I think.
There you go.
Am I back? My bad.
You're back.
So Illinois was playing Notre Dame at a college basketball game. It was right after the Brian Kelly news, and Illinois student section, while they were beating the crap out of Notre Dame, started chanting "Hire Nagy" at Notre Dame, which I thought was pretty funny. Matt Nagy, I know his son plays high school football in Illinois. And he had I think senior day last week or like a big game, whatever, maybe a state championship or something, some sort of big game. And the entire student section for the other high school was chanting like "Fire Nagy" and "Nagy sucks." So imagine being that his son, man. That sucks. That's crazy.
Rough. Yeah. And
like there's got to be Bears fans on his own team. You're in Illinois that are like, yeah. I think he's
Yeah.
an idiot too. Like, I think his dad's an idiot too. Like, that's funny.
Yeah. Well, speaking of rough, the Lions lose on a walk-off field goal for the third time this year. Like, this team's just cursed, man. 3 walk-off field goal losses and a tie.
Yeah, it's insane. This Lions team's just I feel like they're destined to get a win against Minnesota. Like I just feel like
They can't both lose on a field goal in that game.
Yeah, they're so destined to somehow win that weirdo game like this weekend. Either that or they're gonna lose like 51-6, I feel like.
The only way that game can possibly end is in overtime with both kickers missing chip shot field goals, and it's a tie.
Oh my god, that'd be incredible. If the Lions tie 2 games, that I feel like they should just give them a win at that point. Like, convert the 2 ties into a win.
I mean, standings wise, it all comes out the same.
Yeah,
so technically, it's a win. Are you winless if you have 2 ties? I don't know. I guess so.
Is their winning percentage 0-0-0 right now? It has to be, right?
That's a good question. I'm going to look it up while you talk about the Raiders and the Cowboys. The Raiders dropped the Cowboys 36-33. You talk about that, and I'm going to look up their winning percentage.
It was a ref show. It was an absolute ref show. I was driving around during the second half of this game, so I was actually like listening to I had the game playing on my phone while driving to somewhere else. The second Thanksgiving I had to go to, and I'm listening to how crazy the flags were, and it just felt like the most out of rhythm game I've ever watched. And obviously I was out of rhythm watching it myself. But yeah, it turns out that when Dak Prescott and the Cowboys don't have CeeDee Lamb and Amari Cooper, and on top of that, having Michael Gallup and Dalton Schultz and 2 really good running backs with a good O-line, it seems like when you remove O-linemen and when you remove the top 2 receivers, that does have a little bit of an effect. Obviously, they still ended up putting up some points, obviously, and coming back in that game and making it a game and going into overtime. But I think this game was just like another glaring example of why the Cowboys are not a legit Super Bowl contender and why I think that defense got anointed too quickly. I think that all the concerns we had about the Cowboys defense and coverage are starting to come back as you give up the amount of yards and the amount of points that you did to the Raiders, who were looking dead as disco like 2-3 weeks going into that game, and lost Darren Waller in the middle of that game as well. It's pretty shocking to see the amount of passing they were able to do against the Cowboys in that game.
So I did look it up, and their winning percentage is .045. And so, in fact, a tie does count as a half of a win for win percentage. So
it's interesting.
Yeah, the Cowboys defense was making a living on giving up a lot of yards and forcing turnovers early in the season. And the thing about turnovers is if you get a ton of turnovers or if you get no turnovers, that's usually about luck. There's a large element of turnover luck. When the ball hits that guy in the hands and goes through his hands, is there a safety behind him to pick it off or not? Like, that's not the safety being great. It's being in the right place at the right time. And that's not to take away from it. There's skill involved in it, but they were getting a lot of turnover luck early. I think as that has regressed to the mean later in the season, you started to see some of the holes in that defense. And credit to the Raiders, they stopped their slide. They pick up a big win in a tough environment on the road, prime time. The biggest thing, aside from the penalties for me, is looking at the Raiders offense. Deshaun Jackson gets 102 yards and a touchdown, but the biggest beneficiary of Deshaun Jackson was Hunter Renfrow. Deshaun being on the field opens up the underneath game, and Renfrow gets 8 catches for 134 yards, largely in those underneath areas that defenses have just sat on since Henry Ruggs has been gone. And so if Djax can open that up, it opens up a new element for that offense. But the Cowboys, they got to figure something out. They've lost 3 of 4 now, and they've had 7+ flags in 8 games this season. And so lack of discipline and that regression in turnover luck is really costing this team down the stretch.
I'm not sure when we should get into the playoff picture for the NFC. Maybe we should have done that during the Eagles segment. I guess we can just kind of do it here a little bit. But the Dallas Cowboys are still safe in the NFC East, in my opinion.
Oh, yeah.
Maybe they wouldn't have been if we were able to win this week. Maybe you could have said we could have started to make a comeback if that was the case. What this does, though, and what this loss does is it probably takes them out of any hope at having home field. And what that does is it probably eliminates any chance that they care in Week 18 against the Eagles, which is a good thing for the Eagles if we're able to go 3-1 down the stretch here and get to 8-8 going into that game. I think you can make an argument that if you get to 8-8 and if you get to 8-8 going into Week 18, you will be able to be playing for your destiny and controlling your destiny to win and make the playoffs at 9-8. Because I think you take a look at the playoff picture. I'm eliminating the NFC South besides the Bucs. I don't think the Saints are going to turn this around. I don't think they have the guys around quarterback, and I don't think they have the quarterback, even if I think Sean Payton's a genius. The Falcons are bad, and I know they beat the Jaguars, which we'll get to, but that was not an inspiring win. And the Panthers are dead. So those three teams, you can eliminate those three teams. And then what does it come down to? I think you can get rid of Chicago. Detroit obviously can't make it. And I think you can get rid of Seattle after last night. So what it comes down to is Minnesota, Philadelphia, and Washington. I think one of those three teams makes the playoffs. And I think Minnesota's a fraud. And you look at their schedule, and I think it's harder than Philadelphia's or Washington's. I think second place and you could throw New York into this conversation. I don't think the Giants are good enough whatsoever. So I'm leaving them out pretty much. But what I'll say is, to couch that, I think second place in the NFC East gets the 7th seed.
Yeah, I think you laid that out all pretty well. I think there is still the Eagles have to, obviously they have to beat the football team. Freudian slip there. They've got to beat the football team. They might have to beat them twice.
It's okay. The Monday Night Football announcer last night, that was like, you have your line at the end of the game as they kneel it down, and he goes, I'm quoting him so I can say it, and the Redskins win 3 straight, WFT. And I was like, it feels like that was like rehearsed. So how did you have Redskins in there? Like, it's not like the first year anymore. It's not like it's been 6 weeks. Like, this is the second year of the football team. I was just like, really? Steve Levy, you're the announcer for Monday Night Football?
Yeah. So, yeah, it'll be interesting to see how it plays out. I think the Eagles, they might not have to win out. They definitely can only lose one more. But in all likelihood, they might need to win out to get in here.
I don't think so. I think you can go 3-1 leading into Week 18 and sitting at 8-8. I think 9-8 gets in. I don't think Minnesota or Washington are getting to 9-8. To be quite honest, I think there's a chance 8-9 gets in. But if that's the case, that probably means Washington beat us once or twice. So that probably means that they would get the tiebreaker over us. So it'll be interesting to see. If I had to place my bet on who gets that 7th seed right now, I'd probably place it on Washington. To be quite honest, I think that they are looking the best of those three teams right now, and looking like they have the most identity of those three teams. But I would say Philly's second. I really don't think it'll be Minnesota. I really think that game against. Well, I'm like getting way. I'm sorry. I'm so scatterbrained right now. But the playoff picture is hard to stay on one game. But we'll kind of get to that stuff as we go along.
All right, let's go. Buffalo at New Orleans. Buffalo wins 31-6. Josh Allen throws 2 interceptions. Buddy completes 82% of his passes in the game. Devastating news for Buffalo, though. Tre'Davious White left the game with a knee injury. Later, MRI confirmed it was an ACL, and he is out for the year. So it's a huge, huge loss for Buffalo, a team that's in no danger of missing the playoffs, but now you got to question how deep they're going to be able to run.
I don't know about that. I'm nervous about the Bills. I'm officially like very, very nervous about the Bills. This wasn't one of those games. I'm kind of saying that without even acknowledging the result. I'm not taking anything away from this game. I think the Saints are terrible. I think the Saints are really bad, and I think that they were just kind of able to build a lead in Buffalo and then kind of keep it, and knowing that the Saints were never going to score. So I did not walk away very impressed with Buffalo. I just walked away thinking New Orleans was dead. And I just walked away thinking that, I don't know how you could feel confident about Buffalo going into this Monday night game next week against New England. And it's a huge game, and they're favored by 3 in it already. But I think that it's going to be a fun game. That's definitely game of the week next week. I think it's on Monday Night Football, like I said. And that's kind of, I don't have many takeaways from this game. My takeaways are all kind of looking at that game.
All right. Let's roll on to Pittsburgh at Cincinnati. Pittsburgh loses 41-10. It was 31-3 at halftime. So this was an even bigger blowout than the final score indicates, which is saying something when it was a 31-point spread. Joe Mixon rushed for 165 yards against a usually stingy Steelers defense, a Steelers defense that was getting some key players back in this game. So you look at the Steelers, their last 3 games are a win over the Bears aided by awful officiating, a tie with the Lions, and a 31-point loss to the Bengals. And I'm feeling good about my under 8 wins for the Steelers future bet again.
Yeah, it's a shame that they won that game against the Bears. I guess it's good for the Eagles that they won that game against the Bears. The Bears would be 5-6 right now if they weren't screwed by the refs in that game, and they'd be right in the thick of things in the NFC playoff picture. Justin Fields would have a chance to go to the playoffs if that was the case. But I guess it's good for everyone that they didn't. I think you said it on Pittsburgh. I think that there's no way they're winning. Well, it was just 8 flat, 8.5, or
I think it was 8
flat. I don't think they're getting.
I can't remember. I have to look it up.
I don't think they're getting to 8 wins, so I don't even think you have to worry about a push. They look dead to me, and it looks like that's going to be a team that has to make a lot of decisions. Do I think that's a team that could add Aaron Rodgers and win the Super Bowl next year? Yeah, I still do. I still do think that. I know that you have to fix some things on the O-line, but when you have Najee, you have Claypool, Deontay Johnson, you have a tight end in Freiermuth now, which I don't think that was a great pick, but he actually has looked better than I expected. And you have a lot of pieces on defense to be excited about that are all pretty young, and Minka, Devin Bush, TJ Watt, and some others that I'm forgetting about. There's a lot to be excited about in Pittsburgh, but this year's a lost season. And it's a lost season because the front office has had absolutely no foresight in how to deal with this Ben Roethlisberger situation and how to replace Ben Roethlisberger and how to phase him out. And it's hard not to kind of think back to those Giants teams that kind of did the same thing with Eli Manning.
Yeah, I think they are definite contenders to go get Aaron Rodgers or to go get Russell Wilson in the offseason. I mean, they're a really good team minus that position. And so I think, this isn't the best draft class. I think they go get a vet here and they try to run it back next year.
And I'll also say, because I buried the lead here, the more important part of this whole game is Cincinnati. Cincinnati made a statement. That is one of the biggest statement wins of the year, in my opinion. And I can say that all that I just said about Pittsburgh, saying I don't think they're very good, saying I think they're dead, they're very hurt, and they have no quarterback. But you dropped 41 on their defense. I mean, you killed Pittsburgh and you stomped on them, and you kept their foot on their throat for the whole game. I mean, you never let Pittsburgh up. You never let them back in the game. You just dominated it from start to finish from minute 0 to 60. And, they beat the Raiders 2 weeks ago, the Bengals. And they actually won by a lot. I think they ended up winning that game by close to 20 points. But you didn't walk away from that Bengals game being like, yeah, the Bengals they're real. They're legit. Like, no matter what happens, I believe in the Bengals. I'm kind of walking away from the Steelers game thinking, like, are the Bengals going to win this division? Are the Bengals someone we have to think about maybe making a run, kind of similar to how the Titans did a few years ago? Like, I could see the Bengals maybe going to the AFC Championship. Maybe things get crazy. Maybe they go to the Super Bowl. Like, I'm starting to think crazy things about this Bengals team.
Yeah, I'm not all the way there yet, but I do think they've got a shot to win this division. I still worry about that offensive line. I still worry about the amount of times they go empty and the amount of hits that Joe Burrow takes. But it's an impressive performance against what's been a pretty dominant defense for the Steelers.
Yeah, I just think I was talking about the Bengals on a gambling show that I was on, and they play the Chargers coming up this week, and they were asking me why I like the Bengals more than the Chargers. I'll ask you, who do you think is a more legitimate team that could win a couple games in the playoffs in the AFC between the Bengals and the Chargers? Because I think the Bengals are at home this week against the Chargers. I believe they're a 3-point favorite, so that means Vegas thinks they're about even. I think the Bengals are the better team. I think that the Bengals 7-4, while the Chargers are 6-5, I believe.
Yeah, I think I would take the Bengals in that. I like Justin Herbert so much. I think their offensive system is absolute garbage. And so, if you had a different coaching system in LA, I'd probably take the Chargers. But yeah, I think I'd have to go with the Bengals right now.
Yeah, I'd agree. I'm going to be taking the Bengals this week against the Chargers, not to get ahead to our preview or anything, but I think that the Bengals are a team that I was, like I said, I was talking about it on that gambling show, and while I was talking about it and while I was talking it out, and how surprisingly good that defense has been, and obviously all the pieces they have on offense, and like you just said, you love Justin Herbert, I love Joe Burrow.
Mhm.
So all those things said, I was kind of talking about it, and I talked myself in, and I'm like, well, why not? Why can't they go on a run? If I think the Patriots can go on a run, do I think that they're as well-rounded as the Patriots? Am I as sure in their defense as I am with the Patriots defense? Absolutely not. Am I as sure in their infrastructure and in their coaching and in their play calling as I am in New England? Absolutely not. But they have a lot of talent. They have a lot of things to be excited about in Cincinnati going forward. And, it's kind of one of those teams where I'm looking at and saying, why not? Like instead of when I look at a team like the Chargers or a team like Tennessee that we'll get to, and I can't really squint my eyes and see a run coming. So we'll get to those teams though.
Yeah. So we got 10 games left. So we're gonna have
We'll
to
speed through.
Yeah, we'll have to speed this up here. Let's go to another dominant defense here. Miami hosts the Panthers. They win 33-10. Shout out to Cam Newton, who I started in fantasy football this week. Goes 5 of 21 passing with a rating of 5.8, negative 0.6 EPA per dropback. And this is what we thought the Dolphins would be at the start of the year: a dominant defense with an offense that could do enough. They weren't going to be great, but they could do enough. Tua looked good in this game, 27 to 31 for 230 yards and a touchdown. And suddenly Miami's won 4 straight, and they've got the Giants and the Jets next.
I think Brian Flores has officially taken his butt off of the hot butt rankings. Like, I think you can officially say that he's safe. I'm trying to find this tweet. Here we go. So Tua has now played 15 games. He has started and played 15 games. He is 9-6, 67% completion percentage, 3,515 yards, 21 passing touchdowns, 11 interceptions, and 6 rushing touchdowns. Better than I would have expected. Better numbers than I would have guessed out of Tua. So I think that maybe some of the demise of the Dolphins and of Brian Flores and of Tua and of this whole regime, maybe that the whole getting the Deshaun Watson rumors out of there after the trade deadline and after all that, maybe that helped. Maybe that helped Tua. And I'm starting to think like Tua might be a kind of guy. I said I'd spend a minute on this game. I don't have much to say besides Tua because I'm a Tua guy. I'm a Tua believer, so I have to talk about it. But I think Tua might be a guy that needs like the perfect situation, and he needs you to believe in him. Like we saw it last year. He started really well, and then when he had one bad game, and you yank him for Fitzpatrick, and I thought he was lost once that happened. I thought he was nervous to make mistakes to get yanked for Fitzpatrick, and I think now that he got past the whole Deshaun Watson thing, and it was kind of put up or shut up time, I think he went out there and he was efficient. He looked amazing in this game. This was an amazing Tua game, and this was the kind of Tua that I expected coming out of college. When you watch him and, his movability in the pocket, I should say mobility, and the just pinpoint accuracy on the throws that he can fit in tight windows. Those are the things that you were able to sell yourself at Alabama and say, that can't just be the talent at Alabama around him. Like he's able to do certain things that other people can't do. And it's finally kind of coming to fruition, even if those stats are better than I expected.
Yeah. All right, let's roll on to the Tampa Bay Buccaneers at the Indianapolis Colts. Tampa wins 38-31. Despite the fact that I started Cam Newton in my fantasy league, I still won my matchup because I played Leonard Fournette. So Leonard Fournette goes off. Now, we talk about play calling on this podcast a lot. I have a quibble with Indianapolis's play calling here. Indianapolis is up 10 in the third quarter with an MVP candidate at running back, and they dropped back to pass 27 straight times. The Bucs scored 17 unanswered points, and they never looked back again. Jonathan Taylor got 70% of his total yards in the fourth quarter, and he averaged 3.8 yards after contact per carry. Like, this team does not run through Carson Wentz dropping back 27 consecutive times. That's how you throw away a lead. This team runs, it goes as Jonathan Taylor goes. And I don't know what Frank Reich was doing down the stretch in the second half of this game.
Yeah, terrible decision-making down the stretch. And it was one of those games where they were down, whatever they were down. And I remember looking at, DraftKings and looking at I think the Bucs were plus 350 live on the money line. And I was like, Tom Brady's coming back. And I didn't pull the trigger. And it's one of those, like, you knew what was going to happen. Why didn't you just bet Tom Brady? Like, you knew exactly what was going to happen. You knew whatever needed to happen to put Tom Brady in position to get as many chances as he needed to win that game was going to happen, because that's what happens in the story of Tom Brady's life. Whether that be Frank Reich's decision-making or turnover creating by Tampa Bay's defense. But Tampa Bay proved in that game to me, that showed resilience from a team that I think is a legitimate Super Bowl contender. Obviously, they won one last year. But I'm starting to think Tampa is going back to the Super Bowl.
Did you see Vita Vea's tooth?
No, I didn't, actually.
Oh, check this out. Okay. So his helmet comes up. You can see it right here. That tooth flies out. So Vita Vea loses a tooth during the game. He comes off the field pointing at it, smiling. Like, I would still be curled up in the fetal position on the field. So if you haven't seen that, I'm gonna retweet it. You guys go check it out on my Twitter. Just crazy. Football players are a different breed. So Bruce Arians, after the game, got asked about Vita Vea losing a tooth, and what happens when a player loses a tooth, and he said, "I don't care. He's got 30 more," which is just like the perfect Bruce Arians answer.
That's hilarious.
Okay, rolling on. Tennessee at New England. Tennessee loses 13-36. The Patriots have won 6 in a row now. They've done it in different ways. This time their defense gave up 200 yards rushing, but they still win, largely on the back of turnovers. The Titans have 9 turnovers and 0 takeaways in the last 2 weeks. They had more running back fumbles in this game than Derrick Henry has since the start of last season. Titans are dead.
I agree. And I said it before. You just can't sell me that the Titans are going to do anything in the playoffs. Whoever gets to match up with them in the wild card, congratulations on getting a win and going to the second round. Like, you might rather be a 5 seed if you get to match up with the Titans than you would like win the division. Like, if you're the Bengals, it might be better for you to get the 5 seed and have to go to Tennessee and play in the first round than to get the 3 seed and play Baltimore in Cincinnati in the first round. You know what I mean? Like, that is the true prize. I think you want to play. There's teams that like I think San Francisco, will get to them. They're the team no one will want to play in the first round of the NFC playoffs. Tennessee is the opposite. They are the team everyone will want to play in the first round of the playoffs.
Yeah, I agree. All right, let's roll on. Atlanta at Jacksonville. Oh, go ahead.
And just because Atlanta-Jacksonville's irrelevant, and that game sucks. New England's going to the Super Bowl. I said it 4 weeks ago. I got them at plus 1,600 on the AFC to win the AFC, and they are now plus 400.
Nice. All right, yeah, Atlanta-Jacksonville is irrelevant. The only note I have on this game is I saw something. Atlanta did something in this game I've literally never seen before. They trotted out a center by committee. Matt Hennessy started the game at center. Drew Dalman rotated in. Then Hennessy came back. It wasn't an injury thing. And then Dalman came. They just kept going back and forth. I've literally never seen that before, especially at center. Thought it was interesting. Other than that, I got nothing to say about the game. Atlanta wins 21-14.
Urban, come on home to South Bend, Indiana. I mean, haven't you had enough, man? Come coach Notre Dame. Come win a title. We'll put aside our morals for you. It won't be the first thing that fell in your lap this season. So, I would love to see Urban leave Jacksonville and come coach Notre Dame. But that's really all I have to say about this game. This was just a game that makes you look at both teams, even Atlanta getting to 5-6 or 5-7, wherever that, and you're like, man, both these teams suck. Like, Atlanta was terrible. They almost gave that game away.
On to the next game. I got nothing to say about. The Jets travel to Houston. They win 21-14. Zach Wilson is still atrocious. Man. And he gets hurt again. So Joe Flacco is going to be starting for the Jets next week against the Eagles. Really? Yeah, he hurt his knee again.
I didn't know Flacco was starting. I don't know why I missed that. Damn.
I don't think that's official, but I think it's official that Wilson's not expected to play. I don't think he's officially out, but he's not expected to play.
Flacco's going to tear us up, isn't he?
Yeah, probably. Just the latest in the string of bad quarterbacks that tear up the Eagles. Okay, the Chargers at the Broncos. The Chargers lose 13-28. In the second half, The Broncos center was the only regular offensive line starter on the field. Melvin Gordon, Teddy Bridgewater were both playing noticeably hurt, and they somehow get this out and win the game. Justin Herbert had probably the worst game of his career, and I'm a Herbert stan. He takes 3 sacks, he tosses 2 interceptions, just a bad game for the Chargers. As the Broncos, they get a win here, a win they probably should not have gotten.
You'd rather have Herbert than Burrow?
Yeah.
I guess injury makes it tough.
In his system, if I've got to take them with their coach and their system, it's a lot closer to me. But I think Herbert's a lot better quarterback. And I'm not low on Burrow. I'm just very, very high on Herbert. But I think he's severely limited by his coaching right now.
I think I'm just extremely high on Burrow. Maybe I'm too high on Burrow. I don't know. I love Burrow. I think I'd probably take Burrow by a hair over Herbert. Maybe that's just the draft analyst in me who loved Burrow too and didn't like Herbert. But this was one of those games where I was concerned with Herbert. And maybe you're right that that's a scheme thing and that's a system thing. And Baldy broke this down as well, not to steal other people's breakdowns, but Denver, he said, Philly showed what you do against Denver's defense. You run the ball down their throat because they can't stop it. When you start passing the ball, they're able to flex their secondary, which is one of the best in the league. And Patrick Surtain showed why he was worth a top 10 pick, and he showed why we were trying to mock him to the Eagles repeatedly all season. He's an incredible player. He was a guy that everyone knew would step in right away and be a starting cornerback in the NFL. And that's exactly what he is. So, they're going to get killed for a long time if Justin Fields is good. They're going to get killed for a long time because Mac Jones is good. But if they're able to figure out quarterback in 2 years, that's going to be fine because they have a lockdown corner that's going to get a huge contract on his second contract in Patrick Surtain. I'm not trying to excuse Denver taking a corner over a quarterback, but I think that'll be a move that we don't end up criticizing as much as we were for a little bit.
Yeah. All right. The Rams at the Packers. The Rams dropped this one 28-36. Stafford now has a pick 6 in 3 consecutive games. The Packers, they're rolling right now, and they're looking to get healthy. They've got Randall Cobb, David Bakhtiari, Jair Alexander, Zadarius Smith, all guys that are looking to return soon. So the Packers are a team that is definitely, the stars are aligning for them to get healthy and to be a force to be reckoned with here. To me, I look at the Rams defense from last year to this year. They are still running the Brandon Staley defense. They don't have Brandon Staley, and they aren't figuring out the right buttons to press. Like, they've got the blueprint. They don't have a guy that knows how to read the blueprint. And this defense just has not been the same before. You combine with that Sean McVay's offense has traditionally struggled down the stretch. It's happening again, and Jared Goff's not here to blame this time. Like, Sean McVay doesn't have a clue how to manage games. They're down 2 scores with no timeouts and a minute left, and he calls a run play? Like, really? Now, you can say Stafford has a lot of injuries. Injuries are piling up. Well, those injuries span back to Detroit. So you either traded for a hurt quarterback you shouldn't have traded for, or your offense is the issue. It's one of those two things. It was either a bad move to trade for a quarterback with a lot of injuries, or the quarterback wasn't the reason that your offense gets figures out down the stretch. And I don't know. I don't know why McVay's offense always does this down the stretch, but traditionally it takes a step back. It's doing it right now. And the Rams are reeling right now with, 3 straight losses?
Yeah, and my word of the day here that applies to the Rams is just fraud. They tricked me. It was my Super Bowl pick. I thought that they had the best roster in football. I've never been a Stafford guy. I've always thought Stafford was a loser. But I thought you put Stafford in that system with McVay, with Kupp, with Woods. Obviously, Woods becomes Odell now, with an experienced and an O-line with continuity. With Darrell Henderson, who has stepped up to be a very good running back, with a defense that obviously has Donald Ramsey and a lot of other pieces to be excited about as well. I thought you could plug Stafford into that, and he would change his play style away from being the gunslinger who takes all the chances because he wouldn't have to. But that was a dumb assumption by me. I should have listened to Matt Stafford when he told me who he was for the last decade. And I think we know what Matt Stafford is, and that's being proved out right now. And he's a guy that's never going to be able to compete with the Aaron Rodgers, with the Tom Brady's, with that level of quarterback. And I think there should be legitimate concern in LA because, and usually, whatever, they're 7-4, or you could say they're going to make the playoffs for sure. This is Super Bowl or bust. You trade all your picks in the way they did. You go get Von Miller. You go get Odell Beckham. You go get the players that you went and got for the picks that you gave up to get them. You have to go and make the Super Bowl. You have to at least win the NFC. You have to at least get to the NFC Championship. And right now, the way I'm looking at it, I think Bucks and Packers decide the NFC. I think the Rams are in another tier, maybe even below the Cardinals and the Cowboys. The Rams are a huge disappointment, and I think both teams in LA are frauds. They should rename the stadium SoFraud Stadium.
Nice. All right. Minnesota at San Francisco. Minnesota loses this game 26-34. The only thing that you need to know about this game is Kirk Cousins lined up under the right guard to try to take a snap. So if you haven't seen that, you need to go search that out on Twitter too. I'll retweet it. It's 4th and goal, and he comes out and he lines up under the right guard, and they have to burn a timeout because the running back can't tell him he's lined up under the wrong guy fast enough. So just phenomenal, especially for a guy that, against the Eagles, no less, came up at the end of a half to spike the ball, and he knelt it instead. I don't know if you remember that or not, a few years back. So
he was in Washington.
Yeah, Kirk Cousins, just the king of poor game management. Don't really have much to say about this game. The Vikings are reeling with injuries. Dalvin Cook left the game. The defensive line has tons of injuries. The 49ers playoff chances went from 22 to 70% in the last 3 games behind a dominant rushing attack, which isn't ideal to have that as your identity after what you paid to go get a quarterback that you're not even playing. But that's beside the point. They're playing really well right now. A team, like you said, I believe the 49ers will make the playoffs.
I might need I'm not going to do it yet because we're still getting there. I might need some apologies for Kyle Shanahan from the co-host of the show, Shane Haff, at some point. But we'll see. I think the 49ers are, you're not a contender, but I think that the 49ers are more of a contender than the Rams are right now. I think the 49ers are a more dangerous team than the Rams. I think the 49ers are a more dangerous team than the Cowboys right now. So we'll see how they play down the stretch, but I think they absolutely will be in the playoffs. And I think that they did lose Debo, so that is huge. He'll be back in I think 2 or 3 weeks, but so he's been incredibly important for this 49ers team. But the Vikings, that the forgotten part of what happened on that play where he lines up under the right guard is that they take their second time out of the fourth quarter with 8 minutes left, and then they don't get it on the next play on 4th and goal. So you give the ball back to the Niners with 7 minutes to go with only 1 timeout because you wasted one in the third quarter, and then you take a timeout there instead. It's just a mess.
I'm just saying, if your quarterback lines up under the right guard, maybe you save the timeout, take the delay game, and kick a field goal. If your quarterback's not smart enough to know who to line up behind, maybe don't put it in his hands on 4th down.
Yeah, I mean, Mike Zimmer is coaching for his job at this point, you'd have to say, and I think Kirk Cousins is quarterbacking for his job. I don't think Kirk Cousins is back in Minnesota next year.
No, not at all. The open disdain that Justin Jefferson has for Kirk Cousins and how good Justin Jefferson is, like, it's pretty rare a second-round rookie is more important, or a second-year player. Excuse me, I butchered that. A second-year player at receiver is going to overrule your quarterback. It's going to happen in Minnesota. I think Cousins is gone.
Yeah, I bet on Kirk Cousins in this game, and I tweeted out before I did it, but forgive me, Lord, for I've bet on Kirk Cousins, and it came through. That is just like, what are you doing thinking about Kirk Cousins winning football games? I know better than to bet on Kirk Cousins winning an important football game. That was a bad decision by me, but I said it was winner makes the playoffs, loser leaves town, and I think that's what happened.
All right, let's move on to the Sunday night game. Cleveland at Baltimore. Cleveland drops this game 10-16. Last week, Baltimore won without Lamar Jackson. This week, they won in spite of him as he tosses 4 interceptions. Every single interception was targeting Mark Andrews because he's the only guy they've got on the team to throw the ball to begin with. Meanwhile, the Browns' offense is just atrocious, and the dads are out of control on social media. Kareem Hunt Sr. becomes the second dad to speak out about Baker Mayfield, which, to be honest, I think this is great for the Browns. because they now have a reason not to pay Baker. It's just poof, it's appearing in front of them. Like we talked about in this show before, do you pay Baker? The locker room seems to galvanize around him. I don't think you should pay him, but I kind of think you have to. Well, maybe not. And that would be great news for a front office that hopefully will be smart enough to let him walk.
Do the Browns trade a 4th-round pick or something like that for Jimmy G?
I would.
I think that's a good fit. I think that makes a lot of sense. I think Jimmy G to Cleveland makes a lot of sense.
Yep, I would do it in a heartbeat.
And by the way, I'm not going to kill Lamar. He played bad. It was a bad game. 2 of those picks were like, what are you even looking at, dude? But I will say they won in spite of him, and that's fine. Lamar Jackson has won in spite of the Ravens all season long. So it's good that he can get a win like that where they did it for him a little bit. The Ravens are not a very good roster, but, maybe their defense is coming along. Maybe their defense is improving as we go throughout the year, and that's kind of what it looked like in this game against Cleveland, unless Baker just stinks.
Yeah. All right, and then on to the Monday night game. Seattle travels to Washington. Washington wins this game 17-15. The Washington defense that we criticized early in the year, they're back on track. They're playing really well. They're putting quarterbacks under pressure. The secondary is holding up better. Seattle now has a 1% chance to make the playoffs according to the Football Power Index. I think that's too high. The offense has scored 26 points in 3 games with Russell Wilson back. Like, Russell Wilson's going to leave Seattle, and it's as if his parting shot to the Seahawks is tanking his value this season before they trade him in the offseason.
There's only been 2 times this season that there's been a team that has 5 straight 3-and-outs. It's Seattle 2 different times this season. So, and both games were with Russell Wilson, actually. So, there's a lot of concerns to be had in Seattle. I think that there's a likelihood that Pete Carroll's not back. I think there's a likelihood Russell Wilson's not back, and that this is an entirely new regime in Seattle after this season. But the most important part of this game is how many straight games and wins and great performances are we going to get out of the Heineken? Taylor Heineke is just killing it. The Heineke Hive is alive and well. All he needed was to get right and play Tampa Bay. Let's put Tampa Bay on their schedule like once a month to get Taylor Heineke playing well. I think he ended up completing like close to 80% of his passes for over 200 yards, a couple touchdowns. He had a pick, but that was it was actually like an amazing throw where his receiver ended up getting popped and the ball went up in the air and it was a tipped pick. But incredible game by Heineke. And this is actually like the defense is kind of stepping up, like you said, into being what we thought they were, even without Chase Young. And Montez Sweat didn't play either in this game, right?
I can't remember.
I could be wrong. Maybe he got hurt. I thought that I saw someone say Montez Sweat didn't play or he got hurt or something like that. But anyway, you see their defense stepping up. And I thought that Taylor Heineke would be able to have those types of games where he goes 25 for 31 and throws for 210 yards and 2 touchdowns. And I thought that was all Washington needed with a good defense to make the playoffs. And I think that that's all they're going to need to make the playoffs. I think they're going to.
All right. Well, that is going to pretty much wrap this one up. That gets us through all of the games of the week. I've got 2 final thoughts tonight, so I'm going to throw my first one out there, and then I'll pitch it to you, and I'll come back for my last one. So my first final thought A, is pour one out for Oklahoma football. Like we said earlier, rough football weekend. Oklahoma loses Bedlam, which knocks them out of the Big 12 title picture, knocks them out of a college football playoff picture. Not long after that, it comes out that Lincoln Riley is leaving to go to USC. The defensive coordinator is going with him. The wide receiver coach is going with him. The strength and conditioning coach is going with him. They've already had a 5-star quarterback decommit. Caleb Williams came to OU to play with Riley. He hasn't said he's leaving. Presumably he will. The floodgates are opened. It is open season on OU recruits. And I really think that Oklahoma, they are about to make that leap to being a second-tier college football program for the next several years. So pour one out for OU. It was good while it lasted.
I wouldn't be so sure that they're going to level down. So they're going to the SEC. Let's see who they hire. But I understand where you're at. I don't think anyone understands where you're at better than I do.
Yeah. All right. What about you? Do you got a final thought for us?
I'll give my final thought on Notre Dame, and I'll get my plug in at the end. But Notre Dame, I kind of am going to echo the same thing where I think Brian Kelly probably leaving turns Notre Dame into a stepping stone job. No matter who they hire, they probably are going to keep their eyes out for jobs above Notre Dame. And Oklahoma, maybe you could say the same thing. And maybe that's what you mean by second tier job. And Oklahoma and Notre Dame might be on the same level. It's crazy. Brian Kelly was hired by Notre Dame when I was 13 years old. I don't really know any other coach other than Brian Kelly that's been successful. At least I remember the Charlie Weiss days. They weren't fond. I remember the Tyrone Willingham days. They weren't great. Bob Davie, I don't really remember, but that's my lifetime. Brian Kelly's the only successful Notre Dame coach in my lifetime, and I am never going to hate him, even if I don't really love what he did. But it does suck that he left us high and dry when we could make the playoffs, presumably, in a couple days if Oklahoma State loses to Baylor, or if Cincinnati loses to Houston, or or Michigan loses to Iowa. So it sucks. At this point, I'm Luke Fickell or bust. I very much want Luke Fickell from Cincinnati, but it probably, if I had to guess, I'll be Marcus Freeman, the defensive coordinator for Notre Dame, stepping up to be the head coach. Which doesn't get you excited, but it's probably the best decision for recruiting. It seems like he's been the one recruiting for Notre Dame the last year or two, and he's the guy who recruited a lot of the NFL talent to Cincinnati, like Sauce Gardner and Kobe White and some other guys. So, or Kobe Bryant, I should say. Maybe Marcus Freeman's the right hire. I want Luke Fickell, but that's my final thought. More importantly, the plug on Friday at noon, I'll be on Pick Central on Barstool, which is a show I've been calling in gambling picks for since January of 2020. And it's really what started me doing podcasts and content creating and doing all this types of stuff, is calling into that show. And I'm finally getting a chance to go in there and chop it up as a guest in NYC at Barstool headquarters. That's what you see the hat there for. So everyone go tune in at noon. Go follow me on Twitter. I'll be tweeting about it all day on Friday, I'm sure.
Yeah, awesome opportunity for Mark. You guys definitely be sure and show him some support for that. Really exciting opportunity for him. My final thought B is, if you tag athletes on social media, you are human garbage. So I'm tweeting out clips. I tweeted out both of the clips of Jalen Reagor dropping the touchdown passes at the end of the game. And, I'm live tweeting those clips as the games go. And then, I can't remember if it was the first or the second drop blew up. It got like 18,000 clip views or whatever. And you got people quote tweeting it and tagging Jalen Reagor in it. And one guy even quote tweeted it and was like, tagged him. Is like, you got to tag him so he sees it. My job, I don't want to make him see it. Like, he was there. He lived it. If he comes across my tweets, it's because he searched his name and that's on him. But if you tag professional athletes or non-professional athletes, who cares? If you tag people you don't know on social media, making fun of or making them relive the worst moments, the biggest letdowns, you are human garbage. Stop it. Be better than that. That's all I've got. I got pretty fired up about that Sunday night.
Unless you have like +8.5 in a basketball game and the team's down 10, they dribble the ball out instead of shooting the ball, then you're allowed to @ a player and say, hey, why didn't you shoot that ball? Besides that, it's unacceptable. I'm just joking. I've probably done that before. Just want to say that.
Hey, that's fine. That's not reliving a bad moment. They won the game. They just dribbled the ball out. That's fine. And I got no problem with people like, when Lane Johnson had his stuff going on and you had a lot of people tagging him and posts expressing support, that's different. Mm-hmm. But when you're taking to social media to criticize athletes and you feel the need to tag them, just take a step back. And if you do it, you're garbage.
Yeah, I was mainly joking. It reminded me of Dave Portnoy criticized Colin Gillespie, who plays point guard for Villanova, for dribbling the ball out instead of shooting to cover the spread, instead of taking like a wide open layup. It's like Brian Westbrook kneeing on the 1 yard line. It's stuff like that for gambling that drives you crazy. And now Colin Gillespie's a Barstool athlete. Like, he's sponsored by them after like Dave Portnoy added him and went off on him on Twitter. They ended up like having him on the podcast. So that's what it made me think of. But yeah, being like at Jalen Reagor, why'd you drop this ball and lose the game like a loser? Like, even if I think that. But I will just say before we get out of here, both of the NFL draft analysts on this show right here were out on Jalen Reagor.
And when he was picked, not revisionist history, but
exactly. And I know a lot of people out there who I know are doing revisionist history. And by the way, Dives is going to see this and think I'm calling him out. Dives has admitted he was wrong. And I'm happy Dives can do that. I have buddies who are like, oh, I hate Jalen Reagor, who were yelling at me when I was telling them that I had Jalen Reagor ranked wide receiver 14 in that draft and listed 8 receivers that were still on the board that I wanted over him, that were trying to tell me how bad his quarterback was at TCU and how strong he is and how good he was going to be for the Eagles. No one's keeping that same energy now, it looks like.
So I stole this from Trevor Sikkema. But at the halftime of every Eagles game, I tweet out, I'll do an Ask Me Anything during halftime. He does it during Tampa Bay games. And a couple weeks ago, somebody asked, what was my worst sports take of all time? And I said that in the 2016 draft, I wanted the Eagles to trade down and select Paxton Lynch. And the guy replied to it, and he was like, well, at least you're honest. He's like, I probably wouldn't have even put that out there. I would have picked something less embarrassing. And I was like, that was actually before I joined Twitter, so no one could have ever searched my tweets and found that. So I really shouldn't have put it out there. But now it's out there on Twitter and in a podcast. So
were you all aboard for Mariota?
No, not really. I didn't want to trade up for him.
I was all aboard.
Yeah. All right. Well, hopefully we're back here next week doing a more joyful review show. But we will be back later this week previewing all the games. You guys make sure and check it out then. Please like, follow, review, all of that. Thank you all for joining us for episode number 28 of Chalk Talk. If you enjoy what you heard, and we know that you do, otherwise you wouldn't be here an hour and 16 minutes later, be sure you smash that subscribe button so you don't miss the next episode. Drop us a 5-star rating and review on Apple Podcasts. You can follow us on Twitter at @halfandhalf_TPL, at Mark Henry Jr. Make sure you tune into Mark's show on Friday. It's an awesome thing for him. You guys show him your support. So from me, from Mark, from the Painted Lines, we'll see you guys next time.